Chapter 20 to 21. Be honest, you only chose my agency because of my ranking, yes? Bakugo grit his teeth and looked away in a huff, unable to lock eyes with the number 4 hero and those piercing baby blues. Best Jeanist chuckled softly. I'll take that as a resounding yes, then. It's fine, of course. I did send you the offer after all. Someone so untamed and matted like yourself is exactly who I've been looking for. Heroes and villains blur together more often than most of the higher-ups care to admit, but you know how they initially drew the line between the two. This is many generations ago, back in the United States. Tisk, Bakugo glared, just say it so we can move on. One of the nearby sidekicks hollered, mind your manners, damn it. That's the most stylish hero in the country you're speaking to. Voted People's Choice 3 years running. With a smirk obscured by his costume and a raised hand, Best Jeanist quieted his impassioned employee, appreciated, but the boys just bark. Turning back to Bakugo, he explained, it was the citizens' perception that informed lawmakers how to draw the line between heroes and villains. Even the vigilantes that operated in gray areas got swept away by the court of public opinion. So then, what's the takeaway from this history lesson? That this is a waste of time. You bastard. Jeanist chuckled once more, funny. No, the answer I'm looking for is much simpler. He reached into a pocket and pulled out a fresh comb. Appearance matters. Yayarozu's sweat dropped at her new mentor's antics, spending well over an hour in hair and makeup for a photo shoot on their very first day of the internship. Please don't let this be representative of what's to come. To her left, Itsuka Kendo seemed to be undergoing a similar level of turmoil, albeit a touch more casually based on her embarrassed smile. WL, at least we can say our internship is unique. Uwabami smiled, smacking her lips together one last time. There, perfect. When you're a pro as popular as me, appearance is one of the most important things to maintain. It gives everyone that sense of awe they love to see in their idols. Maybe I should try to pick up on her confidence. Momo's sweat dropped when Uwabami decided to try combing her hair in a different direction, much to her snake's dismay. Seems I have nothing else to do for a while. Izuku dusted himself off and straightened his uniform out. Sir, Izuku Midoriya reporting for the internship. Thank you for having me. He bowed to the elderly hero on the stoop, earning a dry laugh. Ha, Gran Torino waved the boy inside, well you got manners down. Now hurry up and show me what you got. Nodding and moving into the dilapidated apartment with haste, Izuku quickly threw his blazer onto a musty chair and rolled his sleeves up. Sharingan. His eyes took on the iconic red glow as the 3 tomo spun out from his pupils. One for all, full cowling. His body took on a faint glow, green lightning crackling around his silhouette while an emerald shine rimmed his irises. The retired pro locked his door and examined the boy closely. I see. You activate them in tandem. Enhanced perception and physicality. That's a deadly combo, am I right? Izuku nodded with a grin, yes sir. Wrong. In a flash, Gran Torino vanished, replaced by dozens of wind trails skirting around the living room walls, floor and ceiling. Objects went flying, as did some drywall, and even the appliances weren't spared from the show of power, if the crumpling microwave was any indication. Then, Izuku felt a kick to the back of his head. Then one to his arm. Then to his chest again. Gah! He recoiled, falling onto the ground, aches already forming along his body. Tired already? Come on kid, the warm-up's over. Gran Torino smirked as a jet of wind shot from his feet, sending him flying even faster than earlier. He's way faster than Ida. The Sharingan can barely keep him in sight. And then moving itself is a problem since he'll outspeed me. I have to analyze his movements if I want to counterattack. Through the hits and bruises, Izuku started to visualize Torino's pattern, the predicted paths appearing as lines in the world like some sort of augmented reality game. It's like playing whack-a-mole, but, ow! It's from the perspective of inside the machine. Gradually, his flailing became less random and more targeted, going from completely fumbling his grabs and jabs towards the elderly speedster to missing him by a quarter of a second to just barely grazing the hero's costume. As he jet around the apartment, lightly pelting the newbie with attacks from every direction possible, the slightest of smirks formed on Gran Torino's face. He's learning. The more he perceives, the clearer his movements become. Soon, he'll probably be able to predict my attacks and land a decent counter. Okay, after this hit, Izuku winced as another kick landed on his upper arm. He's gonna rocket to the couch and jump towards me. For a brief window, he'll be within my reach, which means... Suddenly, the couch shot back from the recoil of Torino's jump. On cue, Izuku leapt forward, his fist cocked back for a Detroit smash. I love these quirks. Unfortunately for him, the timing and force of the jump was off, causing him to barely graze the hero's cheek with a poorly prepped punch. I hate these quirks. Sneering, Torino suddenly increased his speed, flipping in midair and kicking both legs into Izuku's side, using the jets on his boots to amplify the force and knock the student into the crumbling wall, cracking both the foundation and his ribs. Izuku groaned as both of his quirks involuntarily deactivated while he rubbed his side from that last hit. He could go even faster. This really is the world of pros. Huh, so that's the problem. That was pitiful. You barely even started your wind-up by the time you reached me. Sorry, my timing's been off since my Sharingan matured or evolved, it basically improved. He dusted himself free of paint chips, wincing at the little tears in his dress shirt. Probably should have asked to change first. Like events used to play pretty slow already, but now it feels around twice as slow. And then I can predict opponent movements earlier and with more detail. Gran Torino guffawed, so you get an awakening and yet you're worse off than you were before? Ha, that's promising. Well, it's more complicated than that. I got used to the Sharingan over the last year, so having it suddenly become more powerful is really discombobulating, especially with one for all since my movement operates at a different scale than my perception. My insight's gotten much stronger, so it's actually a lot easier to come up with strategies, but of course I'm so locked onto the old speed that I'm not following through correctly and, ow. He rubbed the top of his head, more out of shock than actual pain. The old man angrily threw his cane to the side. That muttering might be the single most annoying thing I've ever heard, and I've had to listen to Toshinori practice catchphrases. He sat down at the table and gestured for his student to follow. Sorry. It's a force of habit, Izuku obliged, but I was hoping that maybe you could teach me how to improve how much of one for all I can handle, so then I'd compensate for this issue. And of course, just generally getting closer to All Might's level. So that's your goal for the week? Become so adept with one for all that you can just brute force your way through problems? WL, that's not exactly how I'd put it, BU dash. Then explain it better. I hear you're smart, so I'm expecting more than impassioned speeches. Izuku looked at his lap and gripped his knees. I lost at the sports festival. And not even because of my quirk. I just got so obsessed with making Todoroki use his left side that I couldn't even think about what was important. And what's that? Gran Torino crossed his hands and stared intently at the boy. What do you mean? I couldn't live up to All Might's expectations and I let him down. I injured myself and lost the finals. Ha, so. Torino smirked. Sure, injuring yourself was an idiotic move, but what's the big deal if you don't meet his expectations? What are your expectations? Izuku stood up with a start. Of course it's a big deal. All Might entrusted me with this power so I could become his successor, and the next symbol of P dash, he was cut off by the tip of Gran Torino's cane on his mouth. Gross. Would you stop trying to be like All Might? There was a tense silence before Izuku fell into his seat. Stop trying to be like him? I didn't say to not be like him. But you're trying to be him, it's a setup for disappointment. I know your generation was practically groomed to worship the guy, especially some loner like you who was too thick-headed to realize he had a quirk dash. The doctor told Dash. But you can't confuse being a hero with being All Might. His trademark is that he wins and saves people, but that's because he actively wants to be an inspiration for others. He's the product of growing up in an unsure time when villains outmatched the heroes and people were actively craving a beacon to latch onto. His actions and story can inspire you, but trying to emulate him when you're so different is just setting yourself up for failure. Hell, I bet you only signed on to intern with me because you found out I taught him. Taking Izuku's stunned silence as confirmation, Gran Torino continued, you know, his predecessors are all very different people from each other. Sure, they were all true heroes, but they had different motivations behind their actions and applications for their power, aside from the common goal, of course. Common goal? Huh, you've really told him nothing, Toshinori. That's a story for your mentor to tell, but the point is that all of them were totally different people. Hell, the only thing All Might really has in common with his mentor is that annoying smile. Even their fighting styles are distinct. Torino thrust his cane at Izuku's chest, but not you. You put him on such a pedestal that you're even using one for all exactly like him. For all intents and purposes, you treat it like you were quirkless. Like him? I don't understand, isn't it a power-up emitter type Chu dash? Gran Torino barked, slamming his foot into Midoriya's face again, wrong. One for all isn't a power quirk, it's power, plain and simple. For All Might, sure he had nothing to work with, but you do. So use that big brain of yours. The teen looked away, stunned and more than a little confused. Sighing, Torino stood up and grabbed his cane. That's enough for now. I'm going to grab some food. See if you can clean up. Wordlessly, Izuku obliged while his mentor left the apartment. While walking down the street to the grocery store, Gran Torino reflected. Sorry kid, but you won't improve if I just tell you. Take it from me, you gotta come to terms with who you are before you can think about what you're supposed to be. But still. He rubbed his cheek where Izuku had just barely struck him. Not a bad starting point. You want me to join the League of Villains, is that it? Stain growled, leaning against the bar. Tamura Shigaraki relaxed on his stool, idly scratching his neck. That's the idea. You're about as renegade as they come. I need that in my party. Stain narrowed his gaze. For what? Besides attempted child murder, what are you after? Shigaraki smiled behind his hand mask. Kill All Might. Then maybe some other people I hate. There was a moment of deafening silence before Stain burst into laughter so grating, it must have sent all the bird in the neighborhood into a frenzy. Ha, you want my help and yet, ha, you're what I hate most. Shigaraki cocked his head, his fingers growing more frenetic. You want to try that again? The young villain moved to stand up, but before he knew it, he was thrown to the floor, his barstool clattering aside while Stain's studded boot pulled back. Shigaraki took a second to collect his bearings before charging forward, his hand outstretched towards the hero killer's face, only for the latter to seemingly vanish while connecting a punishing hook, sending the former crumpling to the ground. Kurojairi tensed at the sight and turned to the screen to his right. Master, should I intervene? If a response was coming, it fell on deaf ears since Stain grabbed the teleporter's metal brace with intense speed and locked eyes with him. Sleep. He then slammed the pommel of his katana into the neck guard so hard, the bar was filled with a shrill ringing as Kurojairi fell over limply. But the battle wasn't over yet as Stain saw a blur of movement in his periphery. He released the katana and leapt back instinctively, just in time to avoid a swipe from Shigaraki, whose temple was bleeding fairly heavily from the earlier punch that also knocked his mask askew. Shigaraki flicked the blood away to the best of his ability, causing the mask to fall off. Gritting his teeth angrily, Shigaraki grabbed the discarded katana with both hands and grinned as his decay spread along the serrated blade. Ha ha ha, that hurt, you know. Probably not as bad as that. Stain gestured to the shiny red streaks along Shigaraki's lower jaw. Tamura dragged a finger across the burn, courtesy of some UA brat. Nobody wants to play healer so. Then this is really going to suck. Two knives instantly buried themselves in the young adult's shoulders before another side kick to the chest sent him reeling and coughing onto the floor, unable to move his arms without searing agony. Stain was instantly there, kneeling down and pulling the left knife out, which made Shigaraki roar, to hold it against his opponent's throat. I could kill you now, but for scum like you, heroes and villains who throw themselves around without aim or purpose, I have something special. Shigaraki desperately tried to move, his anger building and building, until he locked gazes with Stain and remembered the very same look of fury, determination, and self-righteousness that he recognized in that pest from UA. Those eyes, those eyes. With another roar, Shigaraki willed his left hand to grab onto Stain's forearm, instantly causing some of the bandages to fall away and cracking some of the skin beneath. The hero killer hissed before using his other fist to crack the younger man's head into the hardwood. Standing up, Stain began applying spare bandages to the wound before the sound of clapping sent him back into battle mode. Curiously, however, the sound was emanating from the same TV that Kurojairi had called to earlier. Then a chuckle filled the air and every fiber in Stain's being, every instinct, told him to run. Well done. Efficient. I'd expect nothing less from someone of your abilities. Stain held another blade up to the screen and cautiously stepped back. Who are you? What would you know of my abilities? The blue static gave way momentarily, revealing some obscured outline vaguely resembling a human form, but it was contorted and twisted beyond recognition. Oh, I've been paying special attention to you for a long time. I'm particularly fond of your career as Stendhal, though I also enjoyed your lobbying. Who are you? Hee, that's a story we don't have time for, but needless to say, I'd greatly appreciate it if you could spare my young pupil's life. At least until you hear him out. There's nothing to listen to. He's a child throwing a tantrum, treating society like a game. He has no plan, no ideology, no conviction. He's a stain that I need to remove. The hero killer held his blade up and stepped back in preparation to swing down, only to stop on something unexpected. Huh. it's that hand from earlier. He kicked aside before narrowly moving his arms around of Shigaraki's reach. He's got spirit at least. Not that one. Shigaraki growled, swiping the severed hand off of the ground before replacing it on his face. I'll kill you if you do that again. The contempt in his voice wasn't as terrifying as whatever master was watching them from that screen, but it still made Stain shudder. You have a weird fixation on my convictions. Thing is, I don't have any. I just want to destroy the symbol of peace and the society that let him get so big while the rest of us got smaller and smaller. Shigaraki smiled so widely, the corners of his mouth poked out from behind his mask. I just want to turn them all to dust. Silence fell in the bar, the hum of the cathode ray tube reverberating in the background. Our goals aren't the same at all. Stain growled before sheathing his weapon and collecting the fallen ones, but we both want to destroy the society we live in. That'll be enough for now. Go to hell. What happened to hating me, huh? Shigaraki pulled the other blade out of his shoulder with a grunt and threw it onto the ground, flexing his fingers. So much for conviction. Stain picked up the discarded knife before moving behind the bar towards the fallen Kurogiri. That was to make you reveal your true colors. Death has a way of making intentions clear. He turned back to face Shigaraki. There's a spark of conviction in you, and once I see it grow, I'll decide what to do about you. For now, just send me back to Hosu. He bent over Kurogiri's body and prodded him. Wake up. Nearly immediately, the black cloud flared to life. What? What happened? Tamura, are you hurt? No shit. Heh. Kurogiri, please send Stain back. We'll contact him when we're ready to move. Sure. He opened a warp gate and allowed the assassin to move through. What was that quirk? He barely did anything, and yet I couldn't move or speak. Shigaraki sighed exasperatedly. Great, now this is going to be a whole thing. Might as well stitch myself up. He moved through the back door of the bar, leaving his stunned associate behind. Do me a favor and take care of those wounds for him. He's liable to make things worse. Kurogiri. The smoke man snapped back to reality. Sorry, master. Just a little shaken after that encounter. The man behind the screen laughed softly. I can't say I blame you. He's got a powerful ability on his hands. Kurogiri cocked his head. You know it, then? Of course. For that matter, so do you. It wasn't as powerful, but I'm guessing Tamura doesn't care about that detail. He probably hated Stain the second he saw him. I do. Where dash. I don't like repeating myself. Go to Tamura. Now. Why yes, of course. Sorry, master. Kurogiri bowed to the monitor and walked after the latter's apprentice. I should hire some extra staff. It's always a special event when one of my children comes home. That night. After a silent dinner of uncooked instant noodles, and searching for a new microwave online, Gran Torino retired to his bed, leaving a very awake and very frazzled Izuku to his own thoughts. I can't imitate All Might, I have no sense of self, act like I'm quirkless. I kinda get why All Might was so scared of him. He definitely gives it to you straight. In more ways than one, Izuku thought as he rubbed his sore ribs. But what can I do? I feel like the answer is so obvious, but I'm just not getting it. He rubbed his head out of frustration. Okay, think Izuku. Use that big brain of yours. On cue, he pulled out his notebook and began jotting down notes. Let's list what Gran Torino said. 1. One for all is just power 2. Use what I have 3. I can't emulate someone different from me. This is woefully unhelpful, Izuku groaned as he sat back on the musty couch. How will this help me match one for all with the Sharingan? Or get used to a higher percentage? Gran Torino's words rang in Izuku's mind. Your approach to one for all is exactly like his, and it's terrible. Wait, so I should try changing how I use one for all? He flipped back to his notes from early in the year. Egg in the microwave, glass filled with water, these are all analogies. Izuku turned page after page until, here we go, clench your buttocks and yell smash. Gran Torino might have been right about All Might as a teacher. Flipping through his notebook, Izuku opened Todoroki's profile. He's probably the only person I know with a similar situation to mine. His left and right sides are practically separate quirks, but they counteract each other, so using them in tandem allows him to avoid the adverse side effects of either. But I've been using the Sharingan and one for all concurrently for months now. How can I make them work any closer? That'd be like asking Todoroki to use both sides at the very same time. You can't just force two separate things to work together. He stewed on the problem for a while, even digging through the older notebooks he brought with him. It wasn't until he was halfway through Hero Analysis for the Future, number 4, that Izuku stumbled onto something useful. Carefully deciphering his childhood scribbled handwriting, he read aloud. Quirks are, in reality, no different than a limb or a muscle, are Yatsubashi of the Detonarat Company. I said something like this to All Might when we found out I had the Sharingan during the slime incident. I said it was probably activated by reflex. Oh shit. Of course. For everyone else, using their quirk is no different than flexing their arm. But since I got them so late, I've been treating One for All and Sharingan like switches to be turned off and on instead of extensions of myself. Izuku put aside his journals and cracked his knuckles, warming his body up for what he had to do. Those switches used to control different things that he silently opened the back door, which was impressive considering there was enough rust on the hinges to forge a sword, and stepped out into the hot June air. But now, the only way to go forward is to adapt. A tall man in a black trench coat sat in a filthy alley near Roppongi, the overwhelming glow of Might Tower only barely illuminating his long, unkempt red hair and steely yellow eyes. He idly chewed on some sort of meat. He thought it was jerky or maybe an old piece of dried fish, that he found discarded in the trash. He then raised his fist in time to grab a hold of the person sneaking up on him, pulling them off their feet and onto the ground. You'll have to do better than that. Ken Yu just laughed, not seeming to mind how his pink hair picked up the filth and smell off of the alleyway floor. Ha, sorry Koseki, but it's always worth a shot. Koseki smirked as he released his grip on his friend, allowing him to sit normally, and brush the month-old rainwater from his hair. Anyways, what did you want? Ken held up an old flip phone. We got a call about the job. Said he wanted to speak with you. Wordlessly accepting the phone, Koseki stood up. They called us? Yup. He pressed the green phone button twice and held it to his ear. Within moments, a familiar voice sounded from the line. Ah, Mr. Hagane. I was hoping you'd call back soon, but this is especially quick. I appreciate your professionalism. Well, you're paying me. Koseki scratched his unshaven chin, the rough and unmanaged skin flaking away. What do you need? You see, I was hoping we could make an alteration to our arrangement. Tensing, Koseki tightened his fist. Does this mean you're out? From behind, Ken groaned, wordlessly leaning his head against the brick wall. Figures. Ha. No, actually to the contrary. I'd like you to help me on another job as well. Koseki Hagane fell silent, out of shock and surprise more than anything. Once he heard no reply, his employer added, of course, you will be handsomely compensated for both the difficulty of the task and the short notice. How short notice? I'll need you in Hosu City in 2 nights. Some associates of mine are hosting an event of sorts and I'd like you to help serve as entertainment. Tisk, civilian targets are messy. It's one thing on an island, but this is Tokyo we're talking about. I will provide you all the transport you need to get in and out safely. And you don't need to inflict any causalities. It's about sending a message, in whichever form that takes. I'll leave it to your professional discretion. And if I refuse, then I'll have to kill you. It was stated matter of fact with no room for misinterpretation or ambiguity. And Koseki believed him completely. Ha, fair enough. Don't worry. Your compensation will extend beyond just money for you and your team. I'll also add on to our other transaction. I'm sure that'll appeal to a man such as yourself. Koseki smiled so widely that half of the people in the area felt a chill run down their spine. Sounds like a deal. The next morning. Stretching comfortably, Sorahiko eased himself off his old mattress and grabbed a hold of his cane. Looking down, he noticed the futon was neatly folded against the wall, almost exactly where he left it for the intern. Speaking of Midoriya, he was also conspicuously absent, though the soft muttering coming from downstairs gave a strong hint as to his whereabouts. At least his work ethic's solid. Gran Torino noted, readjusting the mask he slept in to properly cover his face. He's got a decent head on his shoulders too, so hopefully he's gotten a little farther along. Walking down the stairs, all hope was quickly squashed as he saw his newest pupil in the fetal position, frantically muttering whatever deranged scripture he had in those journals. Well, his mind's lost. Oi, neophyte. Snapping out his trance, Izuku looked up from his notebooks. Oh, Gran Torino. Good morning. His voice was hoarse and quiet, carrying his fatigue so well, the elderly man questioned the need for those eye bags. Christ, what's wrong with you? Well, I was thinking a lot and then I thought I had a breakthrough with the quirks, but I was wrong and by the time I realized that, it was morning. Quirks, he's not getting it yet. Alright, let me see what you got there. Seizing the journal out of his hand, Gran Torino sped through the notes. Well, at least you're trying. Your mentor might have had them in spades, but speed and strength is really all he had going for him. I know it's been a change adapting to your power, but it's about shifting your way of thinking more than anything else. You said All Might's predecessors had different applications for One for All. What did you mean by that? Heh. Gran Torino huffed. They had different powers, didn't they? Why would someone who could fly use One for All like someone who couldn't? I can't emulate someone different from me. That's what he said earlier. But I thought that the doorbell interrupted Midoriya. That's probably the new microwave. Go set that up for me and we'll have breakfast. Right. Signing for the package, he quickly unboxed and plugged in the fresh appliance. Then he threw some taiyaki on a plate and set it to cook while meditating on Gran Torino's words. They had different powers. I've been using One for All like I'm quirkless. Use what I have. Oh. Izuku pounded his fist into his palm like a gavel, so I need to use One for All to enhance the Sharingan. The past users of One for All must have had their own quirks, right? So they would have had abilities besides the physical enhancement that could benefit from One for All. Gran Torino drummed and fidgeted while his taiyaki heated, but he smiled slyly. Almost there, kid. Just need a little push. The microwave dinged and Izuku removed the hot plate, setting it down on the table. But then, how do I use One for All like that? It's not as simple as just imagining it. And even if I could do that, wouldn't enhancing the Sharingan just make my problem worse? Frustrations aside, it's better to be more in sync instead of more powerful. Gah! Torino spat out some of his taiyaki, dropping the steaming piece with contempt. You didn't pump it with red bean paste? What? Izuku bit into one. It didn't come with it filled in. I mean, it's pretty good, bu-. Pretty good. It's disgusting. It's just dough like this. Go get the red bean paste from the fridge. Alright. Izuku grabbed a bottle of the maroon filling and started squirting some on the side like a dip. What are you doing, you savage? He jumped back with a start. What? Torino angrily waved the bottle around. You need to pump it in. It's not taiyaki if it's not filled. It's just bread with shitty jam. I think it would taste fine with . No. Izuku winced. They're not fit to be eaten separately. You need to put them together to get something palatable. As demonstration, Torino stabbed a fish pastry with the bottle and squeezed in paste until it was dripping out the sides. See? Try it. Taking it nervously, Izuku bit into the pastry and raised his eyebrows in surprise. It is better. One for All is just power. He dropped the taiyaki. Quirks are like limbs, mine aren't separate, they're two halves of a whole. Most people have a single muscle that makes up their quirks. But then Todoroki's hot and cold are like an antagonistic pair that counter each other but come together to form an arm or a shoulder. But then the Sharingan and One for All aren't quirks to themselves, they're like two muscles coming together to form a muscle group that's way better than them individually. Izuku grabbed the pastry off the floor and held it up proudly. Gran Torino, I'm the taiyaki. Go get some sleep, kid. And no, just look. Izuku widened his stance and clenched his fists. I did have to change my way of thinking. It was never about putting the two together, they should never have been separated. The Sharingan and One for All are connected now, so I need to think of them like it. Green lightning arced across Izuku's body, which began to glow as normal. However, his eyes began to spark before roaring to life with a borderline blinding shine. Shielding his eyes, Torino smiled. Now this, I can work with. The glow dimmed slightly, revealing two luminous jade eyes with 3 tomo each, revolving around his pupil rapidly like planets to a sun. It's slower than before, but if I increase my output. The lightning picked up a bit of speed. It gets faster. But then if I take it down a notch. The lightning subsided, leaving only a faint aura around the teenager. It's even slower than before. This is my real quirk. Sharingan, true cowling. Gran Torino zipped around his home, furniture skidding across the damaged tile from the recoil of his jumps. Try this on for size. He aimed his heel at Midoriya's face and swung in a wide berth. Right as the kick was about to land, Izuku moved his head slightly to the left and bent his knees so the attack only barely grazed his fluffy hair. Pivoting immediately, he reached to grab onto his opponent's leg, only for the latter to jet away in a burst of speed. Perching himself in a fresh crater on his wall, Torino grinned at the boy, almost. 2 minutes left. He then rocketed off again. It had been like this since the prior morning, with Izuku's relentless desire to test out True Cowling's abilities and Torino's sadism pushing the duo to engage in sparring match after sparring match. Of course, repeated practice also allowed the mentor to pick at his students' newfound abilities. His movements are far more synchronized than they were at the festival. Plus his reaction time is improved while he's also acting more efficiently and aggressively. This has the makings of a real fighting style. Though, Torino frowned when he saw Izuku stop mid-movement, which ultimately cost him a punch to the gut. He hasn't ironed out the kinks yet. Soon enough, the timer was nearing its end and Gran Torino decided to have his fun. Come on, you need to land a solid hit on me for it to count. He upped his speed and delivered 2 back-to-back kicks on Midoriya's torso, breaking the boy out of his true cowling. Shit, Izuku quickly devised a plan and dove behind the couch. Gran Torino smirked. So basic, he shot off the opposite wall straight for the sofa, intending to slam it, and by proxy, Midoriya, into the exposed brick behind. Unfortunately for him, the couch suddenly lifted off the ground as a grinning Midoriya re-established true cowling and swung the furniture piece like an oversized baseball bat. Now, you try this on for size. However, the pro hero performed a mid-air change in direction and rocketed first onto the ceiling, then onto the wall behind Midoriya, and then finally into his student's side. As he completed his combo, the timer rang, drowning out his student's cry of pain. Sorry kid, but that's another win for whoa. Right as the attack landed, Midoriya's glowing aura suddenly brightened. Gran Torino felt a tug on his cape and before he knew it, he was thrown across the room, crashing into the wall with a painful and powerful force. Ack, he cried, the wind knocked out him. Clutching his side, Izuku ran to the elderly man, sorry. I don't know what happened there. That last hit surprised me, and I wasn't thinking and the dash, he fell silent once his opponent raised a hand. Panting heavily, Gran Torino wiped some spittle from his mouth and gingerly rubbed his back. I haven't been hit like that in a while. What was that? Izuku looked himself over and shrugged, I really don't know. I didn't mean to do anything, it just sorta happened. It was like my body moved, before I could think. Huh, heard that before. Cracking his back, Gran Torino mused, maybe your body is trying to preemptively respond to the stimuli you pick up with those eyes of yours. React as you perceive instead of stopping to think in between. No wonder his reaction time improved so much, he gets to skip a step compared to the rest of us. Izuku looked at his hands, I did notice that true cowling makes me feel kinda twitchy. Like sometimes I have to keep myself from moving, ow. Izuku held his head where Gran Torino just wrapped him with his cane. Why would you do that? Stop second-guessing yourself and just let your body move. Trust your instincts. Ha, a friend of mine actually told me that recently. Izuku envisioned his co-deputy representative. Oh, I should probably tell her about this, since she helped me develop full cowl and all. Well, it's good advice. Gran Torino huffed, seriously, you can't get in your own way like that, although, based on that nosebleed, I'm guessing there's some downside to acting on pure instinct. Izuku raised an eyebrow before wiping his nose, his eyes widening at the red liquid that came back on his hand. What? How'd that happen? My head sorta hurts too. You said your current limit's 5%, right? Why yeah. Izuku questioned while leaning his head back and pinching his nostrils. On that last hit, you started glowing more than normal. You think you accidentally used more of one for all than you can handle? Izuku thought for a moment, I guess it's possible. I used to be able to focus totally on just controlling my output, but now I'm also trying to manage all the jerky movements and the problem of maintaining true cowling itself. And I'm also having trouble concentrating on strategizing since so much of my focus is on upkeep. Torino sat down and let out a big sigh. So your quirk works best when you don't think, which itself requires conscious effort since you have, for better and for worse, the most hyperactive brain in the world. Of course, you could closely manage the input and avoid going over your limit while being able to come up with intricate plans, but then you're not fighting at your best. I've got it. Yeah. Izuku shook with excitement. Your life is way too complicated. He fell down with exaggerated disappointment. Why did I expect anything else? Chuckling, Gran Torino leaned back. Well, there's nothing to be done about that. You've only been at this a day and a half or so and your only fighting experience is against an old coot. Maybe if you chose to intern with a hero with a more diverse combat range, you could get better practice in dash. No need to remind me. But it's like most things, consistent and rigorous training over extended periods of time. Just like how you can't expect an amputee to use a prosthetic right off the bat, you need to keep at it and give yourself time. You'll get more comfortable managing it after a while. And besides, this is already a significant step up from when you arrived. I mean, one for all already boosts perception to match your enhanced abilities, so your Sharingan would have become irrelevant sooner or later. As long as you keep training, your combat potential is borderline unlimited. Wow, that was actually really good, considered advice. Which is why we're going to speed the process up via phase 2 of the internship. Put on your super suit because we're going to fight some villains. Wait, what? Stepping out of the black mist, Tamura Shigaraki grimaced at the sight and smell of the city. Despite spending much of his childhood in waste-ridden alleyways and dingy, infested apartments, there was something about the urban jungle that never failed to revile him. Maybe it was the concentrated masses of people living their lives that disturbed him so. Maybe it was the fact that so many of them were happy, seemingly content to live their lives in the society that so plagued his mind. However, he reminded himself how inconsequential his momentary disgust was. After all, they'd all be dead soon enough. So this is Hosu. Pretty loud for a hub world. In front of him and Kurojairi, the hero killer rolled his neck and shoulders. This city is the latest to be reformed. By the time my work is finished, I'll be that much closer to a just society. But first, he thumbed his new sword and freshly cleaned auxiliary blades. I need to tear the old one down. Stain turned to face his allies. You said you wanted to destroy the status quo. Let this be a lesson to you. Until those self-serving brutes are nothing more than a bloodstain on my boot, until the people wake up and realize the cancer that plagues them, our work is never done. He then jumped off the roof and began his hunt. Ugh, what a pompous prick. Shigaraki scratched his neck out of annoyance and boredom more than anything else. He's like an essential NPC that doesn't do anything but has 2 lines of dialogue on repeat. Kurojairi responded, I can't speak to your simile, but he's far from trivial. Aside from his effect on the populace's psyche, he's proven to statistically decrease petty crime wherever he goes. And it's already shown that decreases in crime tend to be correlated with increased hero activity, both in number and average cases solved. Tamura spat. First of all, nice info dump. Secondly, you've just proved my point. We don't need someone who makes heroes better. Should've just killed him when I had the chance. Now I'll have to settle for my mobs. On cue, 3 hulking, misshapen figures stepped out of a giant portal. The largest one was entirely black with red scars and lacked a skull, his entire head consisting of a jaw and exposed brain. The middle-sized one was yellow, had a gas mask attached to his mouth and a set of giant wings on his back. The smallest one was only slightly larger than a man of All Might's size, but what he lacked in stature compared to his brothers, he made up for in eyes, of which he had 4. You 3 go have fun. Civilians, heroes, it doesn't matter, maybe not pets. But otherwise, feel free to destroy whatever you want. Shigaraki grinned behind his father's hand as his minions descended into the cityscape. Alright hero killer, let's have a little competition. Who can have the best Zerg rush? Koseki stood atop a water tower, idly swinging his feet off the edge. All he said was show up at night, it's Japan. Night starts at 5 o'clock. Oi, Koseki. I brought snacks. Ken called from the roof below, holding up a convenience store bag. Smiling, Hagane tapped the water tower, a glow emanating from his fingertips. The walls of the giant metal cylinder warped beneath his touch, corrugating upon themselves to form a series of rungs like a unibody ladder. You get any booze? Uba chuckled as he pulled himself up and over onto the rounded metal dome. I don't think the advance payment would cover that. Maybe once we finish the job, we can hit up a bar and do it properly. Tisk. Koseki frowned and tapped the tower again, restoring the leg back to its smooth state. I hate being broke. Look at the bright side, you've never been rich. Ken handed his friend a canned tea. Koseki cracked the lid and drank deeply. How is that a bright side? Maybe you'd hate that too. And then you'd be disappointed. I doubt it. You never know. Best to stick to what you do. So we should keep running jobs for thugs and yakuza. Hagane munched on a strawberry mochi. I prefer to see it as establishing a solid working relationship among peers and colleagues. And besides, the new guys are a cut above the rest. You know what I call that? No, but you're gonna tell me Regar Dash. Uba waved his hands around so much his drink spilled everywhere from the can. Upward mobility. We're living the dream, you and I. I'm pretty sure that's what you said when we jacked that Detonarat truck. Was that not living the dream? All the support items exploded while we were walking away from it. That's the shit that only happens in movies. Except it was in my garage. And remember that article I sent you about the dangers of materialism? Honestly, what would you do without me? Have a home. It was an abandoned warehouse and you know it. The two old friends continued their banter until an explosion went off several blocks away, creating a shockwave that sent their ears ringing. Almost instantly, the sound of people screaming and running filled the air, with the sirens following soon after. Geez, what was that? Ken gingerly held his hands on his head. Hagane tapped the tower, causing the metal walls to fold into shallow rungs again. The client said there'd be a signal. That might be his way of sending it. Nursing his ears still, Ken snickered. Am I just supposed to ignore that you called some mob boss a client? When'd you get so uppity? Aside from the fact that his guys clearly know mob boss, it's just like you said, Ken. Koseki turned to face his friend as he climbed down his makeshift and impromptu ladder. We're moving up in the world. He landed in a perfect crouch before tapping the water tower, so it returned to its original smoothness. Hey, what about me? Ube's sweat dropped, unwilling to jump the 20 or so feet straight down. Koseki didn't say anything but he pointed to his forearm, then to his temple and then to his friend. He then tapped the concrete of the roof, summoning a pillar from the metallic elements within to send him rocketing onto the roof of the next building. With Ken, it took a moment for the epiphany to set in. Oh right. Cause general mayhem and terrorize the citizenry. Nice. Poking his right arm through the handles of their snack bag, he activated his quirk, his left hand warping into a conical silvery blade. He then jumped off of the tower before thrusting his arm into the metal walls, whatever resistance they offered only sufficient to slow his descent but helpless against his attack. Forming a gash in the tower. From the tear he created in the container, a torrent of water erupted out, spraying onto the already panicking people below. Ha, now their socks'll be soaked. God, I'm bad. He was feeling fairly proud of himself too, until the entire south face of the nearby apartment complex sheared off courtesy of his friend. TSK, show off. Manuel panted as he ran through the city, doing his best to direct citizens towards shelter and designated safety zones. Damn it. Why now? Why here? Ida, can you move ahead and see if there's anyone who needs assistance moving? Yes sir. Ida dashed forward, keeping at a lower gear to maintain his agility as he weaved through the crowd, quickly scanning the frightened masses for any injured, elderly, or otherwise unable. Manuel, we have someone confined to a wheelchair and a grandparent with their grandchild. Wait, this is my son. Carry the family to me and then double back for the wheelchair. Seriously, I'm only 40. The grandmother protested as Ida hoisted both her and her child onto his shoulders before running back towards Manuel and the line he was forming around the danger. Manuel helped them down and quickly ushered them back. Seriously, how'd this happen so fast? Is it some sort of gas explosion? Ida didn't wait around to answer since he ran back for the other victim. Maybe, does he have something to do with this? Pushing the wheelchair back at record speed, much to its occupants' delight, he turned around again to move further towards the site of the earlier explosion. I'll go ahead to scout then. Manuel thumbs up as his intern sped away before he immediately felt a chill on his spine. Why do I feel like that was the wrong call? With the speedster, Ida zoomed through the alleys and corners of the city, glancing every which way for any people in need of assistance. In the distance, he spotted a small group of people moving irregularly. They're probably injured. I'll get to the sites Manuel told me about. Then, out of the corner of his eye, Ida saw a figure standing in the darkness of an alley, his silhouette only barely visible in the twilight. But in his heart of hearts, Ida knew who it was. The hero killer scoffed as the sound of more explosions and panic spread throughout the city. That idiot, does he have to be so flashy? Turning back to his latest victim, the trembling hero native currently clutching his bleeding side with one hand and the arm around his throat with the other, Stain smirked. Even as far as local heroes go, you were probably the weakest in a while. But still, he paused as they locked eyes, native inhaling sharply as best he could from the sensation. It seems you're also not the worst of the bunch. Stain used his free hand to grab his pointiest and most robust knife off his belt. I'll make this quick. Why you, bastard? Native croaked through the suffocation, his eyes already glazed and red. But before Stain could drive the blade through Native's forehead, he saw a flicker of movement on his periphery. Acting with trained skill and reflex, he released his grip on Native, jumped back, and spun counterclockwise, delivering 2 back-to-back kicks that sent his assailant flying down the alley and knocked off his white helmet. Every time with these speed types. Momentum's as much a weapon against you as it is to me. The newcomer scrambled to his feet and glared at him. You. Red scarf, raggedy costume and a dozen blades. You're the hero killer. He's young. Late teens at most. What do you want, kid? I'm a little busy at the moment, he said, gesturing to Native, who was nursing his throat and wound. Tenya stared daggers at his opponent, his body shaking with rage. You attacked my brother. Why you ruined his life. Ha, I've ruined a lot of lives. You'll need to be more specific. Ida suddenly saw red and felt a sting in his pupils, followed by a dull ache in the base of his skull. Ah. He clutched his head and shut his eyes in pain. What was that? His quirk? So Ingenium's your brother. There is a resemblance, I suppose. But I'm surprised he lived. I didn't give him enough credit then. There was the sound of a sword unsheathing, but you came here with vengeance in your heart. It was never about saving this guy, he jerked his thumb towards the fallen hero, because all you care about is settling the score. But you're young, so I'll be nice, leave. Now. Ida got into position and grit his teeth, all sense of reason gone. Leave? Don't you dare patronize me. I am the last standing son of the Ida family, and in the name of the hero Ingenium, I will make you pay. With a roar, he took off, fire streaming from his exhausts. You will try. Stain quickly looked to Native. Sleep. As soon as the hero slumped over, the former jumped into a spinning downward slash, his blade twirling through the air in a brilliant silver arc. Ida slid at the last second, skidding under the attack before using his hands to slow down while his feet pivoted, allowing him to line up a perfect reverse axe kick. However, right as he looked up at his target, he found his face well acquainted with the hero killer's boot, the spikes tearing into his flesh with painful ease. Gah! Ida yelped and scampered back, attempting to create distance, only for Stain to burst forward with explosive speed, seize his hair, and throw him headfirst into the alleyway brick. Before he could even register his pain, a series of earth-shattering hooks sent Ida reeling, blood quickly pooling from his nose and mouth. These reflexes. This speed. The ferocity. He's inhuman for sure. Then Ida remembered his brother's broken body lying in the hospital, his haunted expression persisting for hours, the terrified whispers refusing to grant anyone in the room a semblance of peace. Recipro dash. Stain suddenly raised his eyebrow, feeling uncertain in the wake of this new variable. Burst. Ida's engines roared to life as bright blue flames propelled his legs into the hero killer's side, kicking the assassin into the opposing wall. This is for Tensei. Charging forward, Ida buried his foot into the wall, blowing through the brick with ease. Unfortunately, his target was in a different location entirely. Your brother tried that too. Didn't work for him. Ida turned in time for an uppercut to catch his chin. Flailing wildly to avoid falling, he used the last of his recipro burst for a sweeping hook kick aimed right at Stain's torso, only to go right through him. What? Ha, so blinded by rage. It's almost too easy. Stain suddenly appeared to Ida's left, sweeping his smoking and overheated legs while stabbing a sword straight through his shoulder and into the ground below. Tenya bellowed in pain, his left arm screaming from the roughly hewn blade. He created an illusion. What is he? I hear people screaming in the background. You could have gone to save them instead of confronting me. Hell, you could have even tried to grab Native and make a break for it. But instead, you decided to prioritize your own childish emotions over the needs of others. Stain growled, slamming his hand next to Ida's head. Someone like you doesn't deserve the air you breathe. So I'll put a stop to that. They locked eyes closely. Ida felt a crushing weight in his chest. How is that? 15 minutes earlier. You kids are always playing on those damn phones. Look out the window for once and enjoy the scenery. Only another hour or so to Shibuya. Gran Torino huffed, lightly knocking his cane against Izuku's leg. Oh, sorry. One of my friends is in Hosu, and since we're passing him by, I wanted to send him a quick message. Though he hasn't responded to me in forever. Izuku pocketed his phone and rubbed his knees, which wasn't very effective through his leg guards and gloves. Speaking of which, you know, that costume's pretty plain. I would have thought you'd go for something, I don't know, flashier. Gran Torino rubbed his chin, thinking back to All Might's early multicolored ensembles. WL, my mom actually designed the jumpsuit for me, so I wanted to keep it in line with that. Although the darker green and black is certainly an improvement. Izuku ran his hands over his new suit again, smiling at the tougher feel and more complex design. The mask is a big step up too. The replacement I got for myself after UJSJ didn't even work. But are you sure we'll see many villains on patrol? For one, we're getting there so late and, wait, also what time are we getting back? Shrugging, Gran Torino said, we'll get back whenever we get back. Worst case scenario, we sleep in the station while we wait for the first train. That won't attract weird looks. But as for the villains, nighttime tends to be the best time for incidents. The big stuff tends to happen during the day, sure. But for agile heroes like us, we can dip around tight alleys and rooftops to find all the skeevy sort that only play in the shadows. Just then, an explosion sounded in the distance and the train braked sharply, sending Izuku tumbling while the more experienced pro smoothly leapt onto his seat. The hell? The automated announcer spoke, please remain seated. The train is making an emergency stop. Please remain C-. The voice cut out as a giant figure burst through the side of the train, sending many other passengers flying. It was a tall and lanky figure, with gray-green skin, 4 wide eyes and an exposed brain. Izuku felt his blood chill. Nomu. In Hosu. He looks different but that's definitely his cousin or something. So the League of Villains is here. Acting quickly, Gran Torino rocketed onto the ceiling and then into the beast, knocking them both through the hole it created with a headbutt. Don't move, kid. The teenager was too stunned to hear, but then he remembered 2 crucial facts. Firstly, he technically defeated the Nomu at USJ, albeit with a Chidori to end all Chidori. Secondly, and more importantly, Nomu was brainless and therefore susceptible to his hypnosis ability. Everyone, please stay in your seats. Izuku cried as he moved towards the giant hole, the green glow of true cowling enveloping his body as the Tomo spun into place in the emerald headlights he called eyes. Spotting the diminutive hero speeding around the foe on a nearby street, Izuku jumped off the tracks onto the closest building and skid alongside the wall to the ground. Gran Torino barked, I said to wait. He jet around the Nomu, easily avoiding its sluggish and animalistic swings. Izuku apologized, sorry, but I think I can help. This one seems a lot weaker than the other Nomu. He's slower too. But all that matters is... He jumped between Gran Torino and the Nomu and locked eyes with the latter. Feeling the familiar pressure behind his retina, he focused his mind on a single command, stop. The Nomu instantly froze, the Sharingan reflected in his eyes. Izuku smiled as his hypnosis succeeded. Hey, now the Sharingan's green. True cowling just gets better and better. Now stop fighting and stay here. Nomu's arms went limp at his side and he slumped over, completely immobile. Huh. Gran Torino slowly walked up to his student's side before patting his back, well done. Now let's go. Well done. Genuine praise. How I've missed you. Izuku felt his heart clench before the second sentence set in, wait, I get to come with you. Scoffing, Gran Torino beckoned him, well duh. If you can stop that thing in its tracks, then of course you're coming. Geez, I didn't know you could hypnotize the damn thing. How long have you had that trick? Like a month or so. I used it on the Nomu at the USJ and managed to get it to back off. And against Kaminari, but that didn't really work out for me, I guess. Damn, you really should have picked someone else to intern under. I don't have any tricks for mind control. You're telling me. But hurry up then. We can't be sure there aren't more like this one, so we need to get a move on. Oh god, please don't say that. My ribs hurt just thinking about them. They ran towards the sounds of sirens and explosions, and past several civilians, eventually arriving at a city square of sorts filled with fire and heroes alike. Oh, and a giant Nomu that bore an eerie resemblance to the one that caved in Midoriya's chest. 2 ninja-like heroes jumped into the air and fired a barrage of shuriken at the monster, but they simply ricocheted off its iron-like skin. Roaring, the Nomu swiped up, sending a blast of wind into the air that knocked the heroes aside. To the side, a hero cursed, he's too damn strong. Another one started charging, his bull-like horns at the ready, then we charge him together. We're up, kid. Gran Torino barked, shooting forward, clear the way, he can hypnotize it. Izuku ran forward in tandem, already focusing. Just gotta make eye contact. Unfortunately for all of them, it was too little too late since the Noma decided to slam its fists into the ground, creating a shockwave that sent everyone flying back in a cascade of rubble. Izuku rolled painfully along the ground, true cowling fading. Well, that could have gone better. The dust slowly cleared, revealing the Noma was nowhere in sight. A hero in a green and white jumpsuit with a red bandana shouted, "Where'd it go?" "I can't see." Behind her, a large shadow moved. Next to her, Manuel's eyes widened as he moved quickly to grab her out of harm's way. "Behind you." Gran Torino rocketed forward as fast as he could. Damn it. Just then, a red blur burst forth and slammed into the Nomu, sending it crashing past the pros and into a building far away. "Ha, see that, Shoto? Let your quirk build and release it in short spurts for particularly explosive speed and power." Izuku's jaw dropped as the Herculean frame of Endeavor came into view, orange flames billowing from his face and torso so brightly, it drowned out the fires around them. And closely behind the number 2 hero was none other than Todoroki. Shoto turned in surprise, his eyes widening. "Midoriya? Why are you here?" He walked over to his classmate and offered a hand, pulling him off the ground. "Thanks. We were going to Shibuya, but our train got attacked by another Nomu." He nodded, so that really was a Nomu. "I guess the League's here too." One of the pros panicked upon overhearing their conversation. "Wait, there's another one." Izuku waved his hands frantically. "Don't worry, we took it down. I can hypnotize them." At that moment, the four-eyed Nomu burst from the side, knocking several heroes back. "Oh, come on. Did hypnosis wear off when I deactivated True Cowling?" In a flash, Endeavor was there, wrestling with the smaller Nomu before throwing it into the air and launching a flaming javelin that connected with its abdomen. "That'll take care of that." Unfortunately, the Nomu suddenly tensed its body and fired an identical javelin from where it was injured that exploded upon contact with the ground, sending dust and debris everywhere. "Damn it. It can reflect attacks." Endeavor growled. Todoroki added, "The one at USJ could regenerate too." On cue, the larger Nomu burst forth from the building it crashed into, punching straight for Endeavor. The latter blocked it with his palm and used his other hand to knock the former into the ground before stomping down with a fiery jet. As the smaller Nomu landed, Endeavor quickly formed a giant fireball and launched it at its feet, sending it back with the explosive force of the impact. Whoa. So this is the power of the number 2 hero up close. Whatever awe Midoriya felt was quickly squashed when Todoroki commented, "Hey, isn't that Manuel? The hero Ida was studying under." Izuku's eyes bulged as he realized Todoroki was right. "Wait, so where's Ida?" Manuel's looking around frantically too. "Oh no. The hero killer was last seen in Hosu, right? Where Ida just decided to go work at." Todoroki nodded, sweat dripping down his temple. "The League of Villains is attacking right now. You think the hero killer is working with them? I don't really believe in coincidences." "Crap. I don't think I'm much help with your Endeavor here. You wanna come with me?" Already on the move, Todoroki swiftly used his right foot to generate a propelling stream of ice. Trailing closely behind, Izuku sped along with his reactivated True Cowling. Gran Torino looked up from his foes to yell at his in turn, "Hey! Get back here!" Similarly, Endeavor called after his son, "Shoto! Where are you going?" The students simultaneously retorted, "Our friend needs our help." Damned kid. Gran Torino tried to speed after them but was blocked by a web-like arrangement made up of the four-eyed Nomu's tongue. "Oh, that's disgusting in every way." A large pair of flaming hands fearlessly seized the tongue and pulled it, and the Nomu, in for a bone-shattering haymaker. "Honored elder, I don't know your name, but you should go help any civilians left in the area. Shoto can handle himself. Tisk, I'm going to beat that kid into submission." Gran Torino sped off with some of the other heroes while Endeavor stared down his foes with a wide smile. Chuckling, he cracked his knuckles while the Nomu charged forth. This is where the fun begins. Shigaraki growled as he watched the number 2 hero take on 2 of his Nomus simultaneously. God damn it. Of all people, Endeavor just decides to take a stroll through Hosu. And that fucking UA brat was there too. He'd recognize that green mop of hair anywhere. This is really pissing me off. Kurojairi watched silently from behind, unwilling to try and stop his master's tantrum. It's wildly unlucky for Endeavor to be here, but those students headed off in Stain's direction. Perhaps he'll wipe them out and brighten Tamira's mood. Suddenly, Shigaraki tensed up before cackling wildly, "Ha! Kurojairi, I have an idea." Oh, I have a bad feeling about this. What is it, Tamura Shigaraki? Hee hee. He turned around, flashing his manic smile behind the mask. How about we bring in an old friend to even the odds a bit? T. Tamura, that's hardly necessary given th dash. Hey now. Don't go acting all disobedient right before I have my fun. Tamura flexed his fingers for emphasis, bring me the boss Nomu. Now. Wordlessly, Kurojairi opened another portal, this time bringing forth a large black Nomu with several red scars and a long, sharp beak. His skull was now encased in a clear case, a bright red splotch visible on the brain where it was previously destroyed. He sported new black wings that he stretched out to their entire 20-foot wingspan, as if testing them for the first time, which he technically was. Alright Nomu, there's a super strong mini-boss down there. It's time for some redemption. Kill him. And then find the kid from last time and turn him into paste. Why yes, M-Master, Nomu croaked before taking flight in a violent leap. So you know where we're going? Todoroki asked as he weaved between streets. Izuku nodded, his eyes rapidly scanning the area for life signs. The hero killer tends to stick to deserted areas with blind corners that facilitate sneak attacks. We just have to search all of the back alleys near the fighting and wheel. Found him. Jumping off the smooth pavement road, Izuku quickly bounced between the walls of a nearby alley before delivering a powerful haymaker to the hero killer's skull. Skidding to a halt while his target was sent flying, he looked down at his friend's body, Ida. Tenya Ida was sprawled out, his right shoulder impaled by a short sword that likely extended into the ground. His face was bruised and bloodied, the helmet he wore likely discarded somewhere else. However, his eyes were half-lidded, with only the whites and a small part of the iris visible. And Midoriya? And is that Todoroki? Sliding in, the latter instantly started steaming, his left side melting away at the frost that built up. So you did go after the hero killer after all. Izuku looked at the latter, who was slowly standing up after being sent reeling from the full force cross. That's the man who's killed and injured dozens of heroes. The most dangerous serial killer of our time. Stain rubbed the back of his skull and growled at the newcomers, you know, I don't like being disrupted. Especially twice. He just had to go for the blind spot, too. Twice. Looking to the side, Izuku felt his stomach drop at the sight of another hero in native. Crap, I was hoping to just grab Ida and run. Todoroki, you think you can carry Ida or native? Eyeing both the adult and the teen in full body armor, the heterochromic teen shook his head, unlikely. Damn it. So we have to fight. Ida grunted through the pain, Midoriya, Todoroki, why are you dash? We'll save you, don't worry. Izuku activated True Cowling, ready to fight. On the other side of the field, Stain tensed up, huh? How is that possible? What? Izuku cocked his head in confusion. Behind him, Todoroki inhaled sharply, Midoriya, look at Ida's eyes. Carefully walking back, not taking his gaze off of Stain, Izuku glanced at his friend momentarily before flicking back when his jaw dropped. Ida's eyes were normally blue, and yet they now appeared red with the pupil outlined by 3 black lines curving in a shuriken-like shape. Ida groaned, he paralyzed me somehow, but his quirk, it looks just like yours, Midoriya. Staring back at Stain, Izuku felt his blood run cold as Recovery Girl's words appeared in his thoughts. Your quirk is caused by a recurring mutation. It's almost like convergent evolution. Of all people. Him. The hero killer has the Sharingan. Stain's expression was shocked, but that didn't stop him from walking towards his new opponents, red eyes glowing ethereally in the night. This day just keeps getting more interesting. To think I'd meet someone like me. If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.